Good to be connected here. Thanks everyone for joining. Pleasure to be here with Dan Cmejla, VP of Community at Apollo. I think I got the name right. We went over it beforehand. Lots of stuff to get into, and even some slides that Dan's going to share with us. I think at first, maybe just like a quick. Actually, hold on. I need to take care of housekeeping things. So we're recording the session. It's encouraged to put in questions into the chat. There's like this emoji thing that people can upvote stuff. So that's a good way for me to comb through and see what questions are top of mind for the audience, and then we can cover those. There's a little feature, I'll just enable this feature that Brittany said right here that pops up at the bottom. I mean, this is just hey, it's not a question, but it's a pretty neat little thing that you can do with sessions here. So we can highlight questions from the audience here. But I think that's all for housekeeping. Let's jump into some conversation here. Dan, I think maybe it would be I always like to ask people their origin stories. So it's typically a circuitous route. So I'm just curious how you got into the position you are right now, and maybe we can start there.
Oh gosh, I'll give you the Spark Notes version. Started off working for nonprofits, knocking on people's doors and asking them for money, fundraising through the perk. When you knock on hundreds of doors, thousands of doors, you learn the nuance of how people react to things, and whether they're reacting and making decisions based off rational or emotional decisions. I am of the belief it's a little bit of a combination, probably more emotional than rational, to be perfectly honest. And that work segmented into career in politics, managing political persuasion teams for Bernie Sanders in New Hampshire, 2016 and 2020. I worked for Hillary. That obviously was kind of a disaster. I managed her large events. I worked for Bernie again. I managed his events. I managed some of Joe Biden's events and his LinkedIn presence. I worked for a community called Modern Sales Pros, where I scaled that community from 1,000 to 14,000, monetized it, brought in about 2 million revenue. And I went to Chili Piper, where I scaled their community function, organic social, customer marketing, PR, evangelism, field marketing, and community, which we can get into what that means in a second. And now I'm at Apollo, and I just love it. I'd say the origin story is a slow realization that bringing creativity and passion and giving your team space to really enjoy their work and really be owners, strategic owners of their work. That is kind of where the sweet spot happens. It's not really necessarily anymore in marketing about how many hours you work or how many campaigns you put out. It's about how kind of differentiated your creative can get. And I think that stems from a space of psychological safety and passion.
I feel like that's been the case at I think that at both Chili Piper, we actually had Arthur on last week, and then also Apollo. So is that just is that part of your decision making of I'm going to join this company because they are giving me more free reign of the creativity side of things, or because I feel like that's kind of the direction where things are going, where it's you need to stand out and be more creative and let your voice kind of be out there. But curious how you thought about that for Apollo. Yeah.
Well, I love Arthur. He's amazing. Great choice in podcast guest, obviously. He reported to me while I was at Chili Piper, and he's just a really epic guy. I have ADHD, and my mom was always like, Dan, you can't do the things you're not passionate about. It led to me dropping out of college after 2 years where I'd taken a lot of really fun senior classes and electives and stuff. And it's to graduate, you need to take basics of accounting and intro to creative writing. I just couldn't bring myself to go to those classes and sit in a lecture of 200 people and have the book regurgitated back to me. So what kind of I perceived as a weakness, and my family did, ended up being the greatest strength, because when you can only do things that you're passionate about, it kind of forces you to only take on roles that drive genuine passion. And I found that has always been my one of my advantages in this market and marketing, is that I never have to dig to find passion. It's always there. And when you enjoy your work, I think it shows, and you can pass that freedom on to those in the teams that you serve, like Arthur, and then you see that those around you end up leveling up, and you can bring their best selves out by just trying to create work that aligns with their passion, right? work, I believe the best works at these 5 things,
Mhm.
what you're good at, what helps the business, what gives you visibility, what you enjoy, and what's easy, right? And if you can
Mhm.
find something at all 5 of those, you're really just gonna like wake up every morning, or 60% or the 70% of the mornings excited to create something that's genuinely yours.
Yeah. I mean, I feel the same way with Common Room, whereas I was at a data company before and I was like, I just the well dried up of creativity because like I don't understand
Mm.
the space, I don't resonate with the audience, and like that's part of the reason why I joined Common Room, just because like all a lot of those 5 things are checked off. Maybe not every single day, but most of the time they are. So I totally hear you there.
And that's the
Um,
dream, and it's probably why Common Room is like really killing, and I see you all over the place. And yeah.
we're trying, not quite as much as Apollo, but we're getting there. We're slowly getting there. Yeah. Um, one thing that kind of changing pace a little bit here is just like I know we're talking about how community levels up to go to market and helps out with marketing. One thing that is always like a point of contention or like people are confused about sometimes. I don't think there's an actual definition, but like wanted to get your sense of like how you define and how you think about community.
Mhm.
I know we're going to get into some slides later, but that probably will help like set the table of like what frame of reference we're coming from here.
Yeah. I'm so glad you asked that question, because it's really going to set the foundation for everything we discuss for the rest of this hour. And once again, Kevin, thank you so much for having me on. It's a real pleasure, and I'm really happy to be here. To me, community is roughly 2 buckets within the B2B space, which is basically all I know. So don't ask me about anything else unless it's like politics, but let's not talk about that today. Um, you have your customer success driven communities, activating customers, defraying the CS burden, helping them interact with each other, getting feature adoption. And then you have your marketing communities. And for me, I tend to focus on the second one. But for me, a community is a space, either physical or digital, where people who aren't explicitly paid to do so freely exchange knowledge and information. And it's more important than ever now that we have communities, because learning at the pace of experience just often isn't fast enough, right? Like I love learning from mistakes, and I love encouraging my team to take big bets, or the team that I serve to take big bets, and feel comfortable failing. But often, like, you can't fail enough, right? Like, you can't make all the mistakes that you need to make to learn fast enough. So community
Totally.
kind of allows you to circumvent that and learn from other people's mistakes, and learn from their successes, and build a nice mentorship group around you. And so that's kind of how I define community, and I try and operate in that space at Apollo.
Yeah, and so that's like how you would define it at Apollo, is just like that what you just described, or is it like a specific like they're on this channel, this channel, this channel, or is it just kind of like wherever there's conversations happening, like that's your community? I guess I'm getting at like, are you
Mm.
measuring it? You know.
Yeah, well, like tactically, the community team at Apollo includes social media marketing, run by the incredible Medjoli Reyes, who's just like, she's just brilliant. Like, I don't know what to say. I feel like I get a lot of credit for her work all the time. Like, wow, Dan, how have you done this at Chili Piper and then Apollo? Well, like, 2 of the best people I've ever worked with were at my side for both of these companies, Medjoli and Taylor, who runs customer marketing at Apollo now. So at Apollo, community is social media marketing, customer marketing, PR, evangelism, field marketing, and then community, which is our relationship across these Slack groups, Discord groups, tools like Common Room, things like that. And I would say that, to answer your question a little more tactically, because I suppose that was somewhat tangential, my answer, um, it comes down to asking your customers what community means to them, right? A lot of
Mm-hmm.
times we get so fancy with marketing. We'll come up with all these ideas and do all this stuff, but I believe that the future of product marketing is customer marketing. Ask your customers, your closed won customers, your closed lost customers, your prospects, what is influencing them? Maybe it's a podcast, maybe it's LinkedIn, maybe they're a member of Rev Genius or Pavilion. Kind of build a map of what the community ecosystem is for your ICP. And then it becomes, how do we deploy the organic, authentic customer voice to those spaces? So that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
how I define community in
Yeah.
terms
A
of
lo-
figuring out where to go and how to measure it. I feel like we can get into that. That's a pretty
Yeah.
big question. If you want me to get into it now, I can, but we could talk about it for like an hour.
No, let's yeah, I mean, I love that the customers are kind of like the cheat code for a lot of marketing. I totally believe in that. But yeah, maybe we can get into I think a lot of the stuff that you're going to cover has, all this stuff kind of baked in. So maybe it's a good like segue into, going through the recent like kind of talk track that you gave with some visuals for the group here, if you're open to
I'd
it.
love to, but before that, Kevin, I'm curious
Sure.
how you define community.
Oh, at Common Room, how do we define community?
You're
Well,
like the experts at Common Room.
yeah, there's like two ways that we look at it, I would say, and hopefully I'm doing it like also have to give mad props to Rebecca who runs our community. I feel like she does a lot of the work that like goes on social and out there that like makes me look good, and I'm just like this is not me, it's all Rebecca. But in terms of like how we define community, we kind of look at it in terms of like community with the big C and community with a little c. And the community with a big C would just be more of like our uncommon Slack group. So this is are the people who are like directly opted in, raise their hands, like I want to be part of this community. I want to learn. I want to like learn how to bridge the gap between community and growth and sales and all that kind of stuff. So like that's kind of like our core community with a capital C. And then of course like there's the other channels, kind of like you were saying, is like where are the conversations happening that where our audience is at, and like the conversations that we're part of, which includes things like mostly LinkedIn. Actually, we have a lot of people on LinkedIn, and then there's of course like other types of like forums, in the developer relations forums like dev.to or even like Hacker News to some extent. But I would say like the core is like a few channels outside of like our actual Slack community.
Love it.
Yep. Yeah.
Sweet. So I'm happy
Well,
to get into kind of the broadest question, which is like, how do you do community
how do you do
marketing?
this?
What
Yeah.
is community marketing? I'm curious, Kevin, how long do you want me to take in this presentation?
Well, we have a max of, I guess we have a max of 45 minutes, but I would love to leave some time at the end for audience questions. So maybe like 20 to 30 would be good if you're skilled enough to
I
do
could
that.
do
That would be
that.
amazing. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I can do that for us. And everyone in the audience right now, hi. Thanks so much for coming. I really appreciate you being here, and I'm excited. Hopefully you find this helpful. If you want to connect after, I'm happy to as well. Okay, so where
Lots
do
of
we
wave
start with
emojis happening.
community?
Yeah.
Nice. Waving
Nice.
back. Where do we start with community? I think one of the things you asked earlier, which is like, how do you measure community, is really kind of central to building a community strategy. Because when I think about innovation and how I think both Apollo and Chili Piper kind of out innovated from a brand and community perspective those around us, a lot of it, it's like how can you operate in spaces where others aren't, right? And then it's like, okay, why aren't people operating? This is Saba, my brother's
Yeah.
dog. Like, why aren't people operating in some of these spaces? And the answer is often because they can't track it, right? And in some cases, it's like, oh, you can't track it. Does it happen? But like, if I were to say right now, like, it's a really powerful company like Chili Piper, Lean Data. They're both amazing companies. What does that come from? Might come from my personal relationship with the VP of Partnerships, Don Otbos at Lean Data. It might come from the fact I used to work at Chili Piper. They invited me to a dinner on Monday. It was amazing. But it's like right now, those two companies are getting a broadcast to your audience. And if we reclip this and create social content from it, we could reach thousands, tens of thousands of people. But what caused that brand moment for these companies is actually not anything trackable. It's like kindness, right? They're kind to me. I like them. They built a good product. I want to provide value to my audience. So I would say that community starts from like understanding that the way buyers make decisions is not linear, right? There's no process of attribution or marketing attribution or whatever that'll truly define the complexity of the buyer journey. Where a lot of these decisions, it's like you're in a meeting with your manager. It's like, what do you think of this tool? And that is like such a fundamental part of the software buying process. So I think the dog is adding to the content, but if people in
For
the chat
sure.
find the
No,
dog distracting, let me know.
I think
But
everyone loves the dog.
great. Yeah, this is Saba. So yeah, so for me, community first starts from understanding like what truly is influencing your customers. And I would say if you take one thing away from this, it would be to ask your customers what's influencing them. Saba does have thoughts on community. She's actually the chief of marketing at Apollo. I just promoted her because of this excellent podcast feature. Yeah, she's chosen to join us. Yeah, so just ask them. So find your research team and say, hey, as we build out marketing, I'm really curious, like, what are the spaces that hold influence to our customers? Ask them. Is it LinkedIn? Do they follow Nick Bennett on LinkedIn? Do they follow you on LinkedIn? Like, are they, obsessed with Love is Blind and now they're watching Kwame's content online? I know he's a former Common Room employee too. And then once you do that, you can build this map. Okay, a lot of our customers are influenced by um, the Pavilion Slack community. How do we represent ourselves in that community? Not in terms of like pitch slapping people, but in terms of providing enough value to be front and center. After you've built this map, it's time to deploy your customers to those spaces. So here's where I'm going to try and share my screen. We'll see how it goes. These are some slides I used at the Ascent conference on Monday. Shout out to Jason and that team there. But one of the things I've tried to build is what I call a mechanism to amplify everything. Let me go full screen. Actually, before this, let me build some authority. So probably my biggest influence is this guy, Robert Cialdini, who wrote this book, Influence. And what he says is that the way people make decisions, it's not necessarily rational. It's based off all of these different, I guess I can stop sharing. I'll share in a second. It's based off all these different psychological triggers that we've been kind of socialized as humans on an evolutionary level to focus on. Like at one point there was the genetic bottleneck, right? And like 90% of humans died. And the ones that survived were the ones that were able to work together. And those principles are, reciprocity, authority, consensus, liking, scarcity. I think there's a sixth one. I can't remember it. But so it's like authority is one of the key ones. I brought it up now because it's so key to everything I do, but I'm also bringing it up now. So it's like, because why should you listen to me, right? Like, why is what I'm saying right now actually worth it? So I will just really briefly do like a tiny thing, and I'm just doing it so that you'll listen to things after, not to be like, look at me, but when I joined Modern Sales Pros, it was 1,000 people. I first discovered from the mentorship of Pete Kazanji this community strategy. In 2 years, we grew it to 14,000 people. We expanded events from San Francisco to 15 cities. I brought in over 2 million sponsorship revenue for that company. Then I went to Chili Piper. We had 5,000 organic impressions per month when I joined. When I left, it was about 3 million per month with zero spend. Um, you know, then I went to Apollo. And there's something so beautiful about doing the same thing multiple times because you can really hone in on the model. So when I joined Apollo, this graph I'm going to show you is actually the graph I made my first week there. An incredible boss, David Malpass, was like, hey, welcome. You're going to present to all the execs next week. Great. So I predicted about 1,000% increase in organic impressions from the company page and about a 500% increase in monthly organic followers within the year. We're about 9 months into the year. We've actually hit every single one of these goals. We went from about 40,000 organic impressions per month from the company page to 600,000 organic. We went from adding about 1,000 followers per month to adding about 7,000 or 8,000 followers per month. And that doesn't include like the massive uplift in user generated content, employee generated content. Last month, just through organic impressions, just on LinkedIn alone, we reached 3.5 million people. I bet a lot of those are repeats, but 3.5 million organic impressions, which I think is pretty cool. And that's just what we're tracking. We're not tracking a ton of it. So anyway, there's the authority. So now let's get into why and how we do things. So step one, identify what is influencing your customers. Step two, try to find a way to deploy the customer voice to those spaces. So what I like to think about, and I'd say I've successfully built this mechanism, is like, the people who should be telling your story, it's your customers, right? It's not necessarily your ads or your team or your marketing team or whatever, it's your customers. But really you want to augment that as much as possible. So I kind of bucketed it into these areas. The central thing is your audience everywhere. You figure that out from surveying. And then it's like, how do we deploy the customer voice to that space? In the bottom left, you can see we have a customer advisory board that we built out. We got a tech partner ecosystem. We got customer advocates, employees, social accounts. It's about deploying all of them to that space. And I think we've been pretty successful about it. But there's like a bunch of different ways you can think about stuff. Like there's a Slack group. You could spend $100,000 sponsoring that community, or you can invite 5 of your best customers to the community and pay for their dues for a year. Like I'll let you decide which one's more authentic or which one's more organic or real, but that's kind of the first step. Try to build this mechanism so that you can deploy the customer voice. Thought maybe we'd pause there and take any questions before I move on to the next slide.
Yeah, I actually have a question selfishly. I think one thing that's helpful is like probably like examples of like, okay, you're listening to the customers are telling you this thing, or you're gathering data from them, and then like, what's an example? I wonder if you could share like, you know, we listened to the customers, we did this thing, and that's one of the things that contributed to this number like beating our expectations. If you have something like that, I'm very curious. Yeah.
Yeah, my last couple of months at Chili Piper, about 2/3 of all revenue had been touched by community programs. So a lot of that was from events, a lot of that was from other stuff, but that's a pretty good example. Since I joined Apollo, we've actually scaled down some of our demand gen and sales development efforts, even though the numbers have been ramping like crazy, and that's because of organic social in a lot of cases. What does that survey look like? It looks like you saying, hey, where do you decide how to buy software? Like, where are you learning about sales? Where's the area that's helped you the most in your journey with sales or with marketing or whatever? And then, like, ultimately, that'll show up as direct web traffic. What I've been trying to get for a while is just a drop down on the demo form. How did you hear about us? But it's like addition by subtraction. Like, man, we have 0 attributed revenue for this, but hey, looks like there was this massive viral moment and it coincides with our best day ever of direct revenue. With a tool like Apollo, it's just gravy because we have this PLG motion. Like I can go viral on LinkedIn and we'll add thousands of dollars of ARR that week. That spikes somewhat directionally related to the lift in organic impressions and things like that. It's also talent, right? Like in the interviews, how do people hear about you? Like, what are they indexing off to decide if this is a company they want to join and things like that? So that's a good example. Another example would be this at Chili Piper. I tried to work with a lot of the best MOPS people because they hold influence. Sarah McNamara is a great example of that. She is the senior director of marketing operations at Slack, and she's just really, really brilliant. And we got her this thing. It was like we made some art. We sent it to her, and it was just a hand-drawn art. It was her face. This incredible artist by the name of Caitlin Barr put it together. We mailed it to her, and it just said "Respect Marketing Ops." There's a picture of her, and then I didn't ask for anything in return. A week later, she makes a post. Hey, I'm not a Chili Piper customer. I just really respect how it works. And it was this flow of architecture that shows the traditional inbound funnel and how weird it is. How weird it is that every company doesn't just allow people to book directly with a rep from their website and qualify them in real time and lead score them in real time and then convert that website traffic into qualified held meetings. Sarah did something without asking us at all. She linked our case study with a UTM that she built. Sarah McNamara is awesome. And I was like, this is one post all time ever. And we looked at that. It's driving thousands of people to our website. So then we went and we looked at all the likes of that post and all the comments. And we scrubbed that once again directionally against the revenue that showed up in the months after. And it's like, that's illuminating just a small segment of the dark funnel, just one single post from one person. It was pretty viral. It got like, I think 25,000 impressions on LinkedIn or something. But like you just need a couple instances of that to connect it to the revenue to get your CEO or your CMO's head turning. It's like, wow, like looks like if it's not trackable, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not happening. Because I'm not going to be like, hey, influencer, here's this art. In exchange for the art, please go online and post this with a
Use this
UTM.
UTM.
And like that's so transactional and weird. And I would never ask anyone to do it ever. But it's how advocacy starts and it's how advocacy happens. So that's a great example. Tens of thousands of revenue from one single LinkedIn post that started from just an act of kindness where we didn't ask for anything in return.
And if you think about how this is going to show up in like your marketing attribution, it's just like someone's searching for your brand on Google or just typing your brand in the URL. So it's going to show up as direct organic, branded organic search. And so you need to kind of like correlate the two. Is there any like strategies you've had for like how to map those two together? Or is it just like pure correlation?
I will be totally honest and a little vulnerable here. I feel like I've had a lot of success just with the boost of organic social in my last company that I don't really get a ton of questions asked. They're like, we're pretty
Mm-hmm.
sure it works. Like it's been epic. Like, but that works when things are going well and not as well when things aren't going well. So there are a couple of ways you can do it. The easiest way is just to put a drop down on the demo form. How'd you hear about us? Um, but other things you could do, you can look at the referring website. You can look at the share of voice. You can do like a share of voice survey and see if your share of voice
Mm-hmm.
has increased. You can, if the referring website's LinkedIn and then you subtract the paid ads from it, like that should be, some of it would just be people who are on LinkedIn previously, but that should be somewhat directionally correct. You can look at spikes in organic user generated content and then correspond that with web traffic. That's another way you can do it. But there are a
I have a
bunch of
funny
different ways to do it.
story. I have a funny story about that. Since you brought up Kwame and Love Is Blind earlier,
Love them.
we when the show came out, we actually noticed like a big spike in traffic, in direct
Hmm.
traffic, and we're like, "What is the spike?" And it was just like we saw a huge spike in traffic, but like zero leads or zero intent from it.
Hmm.
And then we were like, "Oh," we realized like, "Oh, that moment, I think it was in April, was when there was this big spike in people searching for our brand, but it was all based around Love Is Blind." But that is kind of the power of Netflix and their distribution network, I guess. Yeah, it was a funny little thing that is like a counter example to like what the objective is. I think audience plays a big role in like who you're targeting for sure.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure. So it's like just find ways to prove. Jill Rowley was saying this yesterday. She's like, "How's everything going?" I'm like, "Everything's great. Everyone loves our programs. I've hired 5 people. I'm gonna hire 5 more." I'm struggling to show the ROI in Salesforce. And Jill said something I thought was really wise. She's like, just show directionally that it's there. And then like
mhm,
make sure you give specific examples of what's not being tracked. Like here's an example. You said you're like a lot of it shows up as organic social, direct stuff, but actually a lot of it shows up as paid. Like let's think about this. You're
mhm,
bidding on your own keywords. You're bidding on
mhm,
Apollo. Somebody Googles Apollo, then they click on your paid ad. Is that what caused them to Google, right? We're tracking the wrong thing. Hey, look, our paid ad, our keywords that we take out on our own company name are really performing. Way to go, demand gen. But it's like the root of what actually happened there was something caused them to Google and then they clicked on the ad. So it's like, it's so crazy how complex this stuff is. Like you can get better attribution tracking for a segment of your business. Like you can use like Audience Plus or whatever, and then get great attribution on your blog. But if you have attribution for one thing, but not holistic attribution for something else, is it really showing you like what's actually happening, right? Because it's like all things aren't measured equally, right? So sometimes when you build better attribution models, it's not actually telling you what's happening. It's just telling you what you're doing a better job at tracking. Yeah.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, yeah. It, uh, I'm gonna turn to the like Christiana here has some questions, so I'm gonna highlight these. Before doing that, I wonder if you like you mentioned like self-reported attribution. Do you? I think there's a controversy around like should you use a drop-down list or should you use an open-ended field? Do you have any like take there? Like, what's the perfect situation for you, Dan?
Well, there's a really interesting study that came out of Clearbit, and I want to congratulate them on their acquisition by HubSpot today. It's really cool, and I think they been looking for an exit for a while. I actually think we're going to see a new era where a lot of these companies are going to get acquired. I don't know what the acquisition was, how much it's worth, but like a lot of companies are trying to sell because there is a consolidation happening. But I'm happy for the Clearbit folks. Cigar and the team there. It's amazing. And like competition just makes us all better. I see Danny said something about Zoom Info, and it's like, I say a lot of negative stuff about Zoom Info at times, and a lot of it's justified. But ultimately, we're all building a market together, and I'm excited to continue to compete and competing against Clearbit. is going to be so fun. It'll really benefit the customer. And that's what it's all about, like providing value to the customer. Tactically, to answer your question, I'm in favor of an optional open form that's not a drop down, because what'll happen is every once in a while, oh yeah, so the Clearbit stat was every form field you add decreases conversion by 5%. So that's kind of risky. Like, okay, great, we get better attribution, but we lose 5% of our revenue or our I guess our pipeline. If you make it optional, that'll negate it a bit. And I wouldn't put a drop down there because once again, like that's not telling the full story. If you have a just open text field, you can create like a graph with it and then create like a pivot chart or whatever to figure out what the attribution is actually from. But some people will be like super detailed. Like I heard Dan mention Chili Piper on the Common Room podcast. And then I was at this event and then I saw Arthur's LinkedIn post and then Nolan saw something. And then I decided to go to the website and I took a demo. And then 5 months later, the demo was great, but I didn't have, I got locked into an auto renew from whatever Zoom info or something. And then 5 months later, I was like, you know what, it's time to do it. Like they'll really sometimes tell you how complex the buyer journey is. Just having a couple examples of that is really helpful for your like director of MOPS or your CEO, because it'll just demonstrate that like the way people make buying decisions is not linear. It's very complicated and it's very varied. And the truth is that it's not community who drives it. It's not demand gen who drives it. It's not SEO. It's like a cavalcade of different sources, if I use that word correctly. I'm not sure I did.
Yeah, the conglomerate of all the different touch points that are influenced by your team and then maybe influenced from the broader community and yeah, everything. The buyer journey, I guess the buyer journey is completely like different than it was, back when HubSpot was starting in a very linear fashion,
Yeah, so I wouldn't recommend a drop down, but there are a bunch of other ways you can get this directionally, like go into your call recording technology, like a Gong, or Apollo has call recording now, which is pretty cool. Free for all paid users. But you can just search like John Barrows. Like we partner with Sell Better and John Barrows, and I don't have a ton of revenue associated with it, but I'm like, I know this is driving revenue. Like, why isn't it showing up in our attribution model? There are a bunch of reasons for that. But then I go and I search, and this was at Chili Piper, I search in Gong, John Barrows. And then I see all of these ops. Oh, I heard of you through John Barrows. I heard of you through this. That kind of allows you to directionally figure out what's going on.
That's a really good attribution hack that I actually haven't tried or heard of myself, but I love that approach. Just like searching through transcription, essentially, right?
Yeah, you're not doing it to be like, now give me commission on this account. You're just
Right.
doing it to like evangelize for the idea that the way that we attribute revenue is like partially driven by these companies whose business is to tell you that we can attribute revenue a certain way. And like that's their marketing. Like, and I feel like I've been able to differentiate the brands I've worked at by operating in spaces that are kind of unattributable because there's less competition there. Because the CMO won't let people buy a pizza for some random influencer because they're like, what's the ROI of the pizza? But if that influencer 2 weeks later is like, yo, check this out. Apollo found out my favorite pizza is the Calitalia from Tony Giamatti's in San Francisco because I just love balsamic reduction. And they sent me that pizza. Like, that never shows up online anywhere. There's no user generated content. It's a conversation they have with a colleague who they run with, right? Like, that will drive revenue for you. But nobody knows. Like, we don't have Sarah McNamara's UTMing their pizza acquisition or whatever out there. So yeah, that's helpful. At least it's been helpful for me to operate in those spaces. There's less competition there.
Yeah, makes total sense. I'm gonna turn to this question from Christiana here. I don't know if you saw it, but I think it's going back to the graph that you had in the shared. Yeah.
Apollo's everything. So you're talking about the mechanism to amplify our everything, right? So it's like you have a product announcement, right? How are you going to distribute that product announcement? Is it going to be you're going to put out something in your blog? You're going to run an ad. Maybe you have a newsletter. Maybe you have a podcast. Maybe you have 2 reps who are saying something. Like that's cool. But like, what if you had 1,000 distribution points for it? Like, what if you built an ecosystem where your partners uplift your customers, uplift your prospects, so that whenever anyone anywhere was like, I love Apollo, an army comes in and it's like, you know what? I love Apollo too. And then when they say, I love Apollo too, we reach out to them and we say, hey, we love you. Thank you. And like, I can show you that this is working here. Let me pop up our wall of love really quickly. We use this tool, testimonial.io. Once again, if you check out
I'll have to
testimonial.io
check
right
that out.
now,
Yeah.
then there's going to be no attribution as to how you got there. But it's actually from this podcast. So basically, look at this. November 1st. This is yesterday. Look at all of this positive Apollo stuff. Like, it's everywhere. And it doesn't just happen in a vacuum. Like, the thing I'm most fortunate about is we're like the top PLG sales company in SaaS right now. We're the first B2B sales tech unicorn of the year, in a year where a lot of unicorns actually had their valuation drop down to less than $1 billion. But it's like, when someone shows love for you, that's an opportunity to like dive deep on that, to learn more, and to really build a relationship. So it's basically, a lot of it's just about trying to build advocates and then have those advocates become return advocates, people who want to advocate for you multiple times. I can talk about that a little bit more in the next slide that I'll share. But
Yeah.
the survey, just ask them, hey, what influences you to buy things? Like, and then they'll tell you, and the answers will surprise you sometimes. Like, oh, like, for example, my partner Abby Pratt is like an expert marketing operations person, and like, I'll ask for her opinion on software, right? So it's like, maybe the attribution is somebody's family, like there's some CFO whose kid is like an entry level marketer and is like more hip with the SaaS stuff or whatever. And they're like, hey, dad, you got to check out this new tool, Common Room. It's amazing. So that's kind of how it goes. And just like, sometimes people get too fancy, like ask them what influences you. And then think like, okay, who are the potential distribution points for our brand? How do we get them active? And I can share the second slide now if you want, Kevin. What do you think?
Sure. Well, I'm actually like trying to again ask another selfish question, but I'm actually trying to figure out like how do we leverage people. Leverage is a terrible word. Like how do we partner with people like yourself or other folks to like I think you have built-in distribution. You're speaking the same kind of like sharing the same kind of vision that we have, and like so I'm trying to like build out like this creator program, and then at the same time like build up the people at Common Room. So I'm curious, like if you like for me, like what would you recommend as like first steps? Because I'm finding it kind of difficult to like reach out to someone. Actually, Danny, who's organizing all this, is
He's epic.
on this for us. So Danny's epic, and she's doing this herself. So I'm like, is there an easy way, or is it just like find the right people and just like brute force, like ask them and do what doesn't scale at first? That's kind of where we're at right now. It's like I don't know an easy solution to this.
Well, I think there is not necessarily easy, but a simple
Yeah.
way. And first, I want to just shout out your excellent taste in working with Danny. I've been so impressed, Danny. I know you're listening now. All the work you did building the M2 community, partnering with Chili Piper while I was there, your consulting work since. I've seen you speak in a couple podcasts, and Danny, you're just brilliant. So, Kevin, you're on the right track by working with someone like Danny in the first place.
Hey,
But I
agreed.
actually think the answer to this question is the second slide, which I'll get to in a second.
Mhm.
But before that, it's like, I would start with building a customer advisory board if you don't have one. Because it's like, if you think about your entire ecosystem of advocacy, at the center, there's like a nucleus. And there's probably a
Mhm.
section before your customer advisory board, which is like your true advisory board. Like Abalo just added JD Sherman to our board of advisors. And that's like huge because he'll both give us input directionally on how to build the product, and he'll advocate for us. But in terms of the areas that customer marketing owns, customer advisory board is probably the greatest way, because
Mhm.
it's like, take stock of your existing advocates before you go out there and try and build more. Like, who are the people who are consistently advocating for your program? Who's your top referral partner? Like, who's referred the most talent to you? Like, who is the owner of the largest account, the champion at your account with the largest ARR? Like, build a structure for those people and then ask them, hey, how do you want to work with us? Like, how can we support you? Sometimes it'll be, oh, I want to impact their roadmap. It'll be like,
Mhm.
I want better access to CS. Like, I want access to your executives directly, right? So that's where I would start. Build a customer advisory board, or better yet, build 5 customer advisory boards. I know that's crazy, but I keep building 5 instead of 1 everywhere I go, because I believe that like part of the benefit of a customer advisory board is people sharing things with each other. So at Apollo, for example, we have a customer advisory board of like the top individually contributing reps amongst our clientele. And then we have a customer board of the top directors of RevOps amongst our clientele. They don't really share the same problem, so it doesn't make sense to unite them, but you can leverage them for different things. Like the CEO of your largest client is unlikely to go on LinkedIn and be like, wow, like +1 on this comment about how I love Apollo over Zoom info. Like, I'm here for this, because they're busy running a giant company. But like your top performing account executive from that same company might want to do that. And by adding them to a customer advisory board, you can uniquely honor them and build a deeper relationship with them. So I'd say that's where I'd start, building a customer advisory board. And I think the next slide I'll share, we'll get into that as well. Do you want me
Sure.
to keep riffing on the customer
Yeah, no, I
advisory
feel like
board?
everything you say, I have like 3 follow-up questions for, but we can. I mean, the follow-up question for that is like, where are you focusing on right now at Apollo, or is it like all the above? If it's like the people who are hands-on using the product, or is it like more of the people, like the operations people who are implementing it, or the executive suite who's the buying committee? Like, how do you balance all those things? Is a question that I had.
I don't balance them. I just try and do it all, to be
Do it all.
honest. But here's an example. This isn't in the slides that I shared from the Ascend conference, but I'll
Sure.
share this really quickly. This is kind of how I think about a customer advisory board. And this might be helpful too. It's like, here are a lot of the communities that influence us. This is actually well as a chili piper. And the answer to kind of influencing all these spaces of influence isn't to be like, hey, WizOps, we're going to give you money and represent us. It's this black dot in the middle. How do we deploy our customers to these spaces, right? That's the surveying part of it. The surveying part of it will help you make this infographic. And then it's like, how do we distribute them? This was the customer advisory board at Chili Piper. So you can see it's 6 groups, but you leverage them for all different things. Like the top reps, they were the best people at providing references and referrals, but not really great product feedback, right? So you kind of leverage them across different things. In terms of this slide,
I
I
have it
can
all
go to
click
the,
and everything. This is like super like visual and helpful. I think I love it.
I'm glad you like it. I am not a graphic designer, so thank you. But this is kind of the second slide I think we might want to talk about for a little bit.
Yeah, let's get
Like,
into that. Sorry, we keep on deferring. Yeah.
because this is a really simple way to start. Take stock of all the potential distribution points for your audience, right? Customer evangelism, community partners, employee evangelism, and then realize that they all have unique distribution points, right? So like, how do you go from having 5 distribution points to having 100 to having 1,000? Like I showed you the wall of love. There are dozens of people talking about Apollo every day, just on LinkedIn, and that doesn't include the hundreds of G2 reviews we get every month, word of mouth, the events, the podcasts, all that stuff. So if you take stock of the potential distribution points for your audience, then you can think about how to leverage them. And I generally leverage them in 2 buckets. One is your owned marketing channels. So like, here's a great example of leaning in with the customer. Yesterday or Monday, I was at the Ascend conference. I was talking about how people love Apollo and I like to lean in with them. This guy in the back is like, hey, pick me. And I was like, all right, let's turn this into a Q&A. He's like, I love Apollo so much. As an early stage founder, there's no other tool I'd rather use. It combines engagement and data and sequences and AI and call recording and lead scoring and AI plays and all this crazy stuff, enrichment, intent. I love it. I'm like, that's amazing. And now I'm like, okay, in my head, this guy is advocating for us. How do we get him to advocate more? So after my speech, I went up to him. I said, thank you so much. How can I support you? We have a bunch of different options, but the solution was that we're going to showcase him from our company page tomorrow. 4 days after that speech, we're taking another step and diving deeper with him. So basically what I'm saying is, I'm like, here's a guy who's advocating for us organically. How do we leverage that voice across our existing marketing channels, right? And it doesn't even have to be about Apollo. I can be like, he's like, okay, you want me to talk about Apollo or not? I'm like, if you want to, sure, but I would rather you talk about whatever benefits you. And what I'm doing there is, rather than placing them into a box, I'm trying to provide value, and that'll make them want to come back to advocate for us more, because we're dealing in the currency of kindness, right? There's something that happened the other day or a few months ago. Someone's like, I know all the influencers are being paid to talk about Apollo, $400 a post, but I think it's whatever. And this happened on LinkedIn. It went pretty viral. I got pretty offended because this is like my life's work, to build organic evangelism. And someone's saying, hey, you're paying for it all, which, by the way, we don't pay anyone to post on our behalf. Like, we have partnerships with influencers, but there's never a line item that's like, hey, post on this. And those influencer posts that we do have, which maybe it's like, it could be construed that because we're partnering with them, it's implied that we want to post with it. That's like 4 people. Like, you saw the wall of love. There are dozens of people a day advocating for us. So I was pretty offended. But it's like, the reality is that we're not paying them, but we are being better to them and treating them more decently than all of our other competitors. And that's where I'd love to see, like, I want to compete with the CMO of Zoom Info on like who can build the best community that levels up the knowledge of salespeople, like who can help people the most, right? So it's like, when you find someone who's advocating for you, that's the moment to really engage with them. And the simplest thing you can do is like have your social media manager reply to every single positive post. Imagine if you're like in love with someone, you're like in a gym and you're like, I love you, whatever. Who's the person from Rocky? Who is Rocky in love with? Stella.
Adrian. Oh,
Stella.
Stella.
And it's like, Stella, I love you. And then Stella's like, doesn't say anything back. Like, that would be so disheartening. But that's what most brands are doing when they see advocacy. Like, that first moment of advocacy is an opportunity for you to steward it into a truly lasting relationship that you can leverage about it. Like, I bet most people here watching, if you had 5 people comment in every single one of your LinkedIn posts, it would like revolutionize your brand. It would like 10x your reach on every post. But people don't think about acquiring relationships. They're too busy trying to acquire transactional revenue. So that's kind of one way to think about it. And then we get back to this slide here where it's like, okay, we have an advocate. Great. Let's leverage them across our own marketing channels. The CEO of a client, we'll feature them from our company page. But also, let's use their channels, right? They will talk about us from their company page. They'll talk about us via word of mouth. Like, we'll have our employees be a different distribution point for our brand. When we raised our $100 million Series D, bringing us to about a 1.6 billion valuation just 2 months ago, we had 135 employees post about this. It led to about 3.5 million impressions in a day. We were getting like 500,000 impressions in a year, the year before I joined. So it's like, that's not possible. You're not going to get 3.5 million organic impressions without having 100, 500 different people tell your story. So it's like, how do you get people to want to tell your story? And if you're kind of systematic about it, you can move from like 5 distribution points of your brand to hundreds or thousands. And that's kind of what happened at Chili Piper and now Apollo. Yeah.
I feel like I'm setting the bar too low. We actually had a product launch today, and we had a lot of people that come in the room like do their own posts on it and helped out a little bit. But I set the bar at 500,000 impressions, or reaching our target audience of like 500,000 people. So maybe I need to up that to like 5 million or something based on your story.
I think that Common Room is an incredible company, and I'm not trying to be like, look at Apollo or whatever, but it's like, it's different. And like, we're a Series D company. We have 400 employees. We add 10,000 users every week. I think if you hit that $500,000 impression number, you should be incredibly proud. And that's amazing. And like, the fact that you're trying to drive your employees to even talk about it is really, really effective. I hired Zoe Hartsfield a while back to run our evangelism program. And everyone's like, is she ghostwriting for all your execs? No. Like, what we're doing is we're building collaborations with our executives, because the external advocacy, getting that person at the speech to want to advocate for us more, you got to do it internally as well. So basically what we're focusing on is partnering with people like our CRO, Leandra, joining their meetings, hearing what they're talking about, helping translate that into copy and collaboration with them, and then turning them into distribution points for the brand. Like, we started working with Leandra about a month before the funding announcement. She had about 1,200 followers. She was posting like once a month, maybe. Her post reached 350,000 people that day, more than our CEO. She went
Wow.
from 1,200 followers to about 5,000 followers in a month. And it's like, when your executives start engaging, then their employees will be like, I guess this is what I should do. And you create an uplifting culture. Like, I never, ever have said, hey, you have to post, you have to do it. never tell anyone exactly what to post. You want to get those wheels turning internally so that gratification kind of closed loop happens. And I think 500,000 is a pretty badass goal. Kevin, like that's what Apollo's reach was for a whole year before we employed this community strategy.
Well, I would certainly be happy with 500,000. I felt like that was a stretch for the team. So we'll see what happens. I'm curious, like, how is there any kind of like best practice is not the best way to say it. I think just like how are you doing internal advocacy? Is it more just like from the leadership, like leading as an example, or is there like a program that you have for employees? Get like, yeah, go ahead.
Someone's like, "What's your tool stack for internal advocacy?" Like,
Yeah.
firstly, like Medyoli and Zoe are the main drivers of this at the company, not me. So the main tool is like trying to just be a decent manager and support people and find work where they find passion. But tactically, there are some tools we use.
Yeah.
So Notion. So we'll create a guide. Like if there's a funding announcement, we'll create a guide, all kinds of images in there, all kinds of stuff. And in it, there are different sample posts, but at the top, there's a big disclaimer that's like the most effective post is going to be your personal story. So, like, please don't use this. Like, instead, write something authentic that speaks your truth. And like a lot of people will do that, but some people will just take a post. We'll put it on a calendar invite. So it's like 15 minutes to post, and the description of that calendar invite is the guide. In that guide is
Mm.
a bunch of posts as well as a guide for people to create their own posts. And then we'll unite it by a hashtag, like hashtag Apollo Series D, or for the funding announcement, it was hashtag follow Apollo. And I was like, we're gonna get 20,000 LinkedIn followers. It didn't happen, but it's okay. We're doing great. But yeah, unite everything by one hashtag. Actually, in LinkedIn, you can click on that hashtag and see all the posts associated with it. So it's a really powerful way of organizing content in the platform. So that's generally how we do it. It's like with Apollo, for example, when somebody uses, they add someone directly to a sequence from our data list, the only living data network out there. I'm just like pretty bullish on Apollo, as you can tell. When they add someone to a sequence, an Apollo sequence from Apollo's data, and then they book a meeting, then from there, the retention rates, the satisfaction rates, the NPS rates go way up. So it's like, what is that aha moment for someone
Mm.
to be excited about personal evangelism? And that's one thing that we do. The other thing I've done is I've just been really aggressive about recruiting people who are both excellent at their game and have a large brand. So it's like, hey, if I can give you an AE Apollo who's going to get 120% to quota, maybe they also happen to have 10,000 LinkedIn followers. Like that is just me stacking the deck in my favor.
Mhm.
So I don't use a ton of tools. Some great tools out there: Octopost, Agora Pulse, Sprout Social, things like that. But at the end of the
Mhm.
day, these companies are like there are companies out there that you can like automate it all. You can like get fake likes and stuff through like, and I'm just like, nah. Like the truth is always organic, because like when someone needs you to tell them to post, you're creating a recurring job for yourself. But when someone sees the value of posting and you resource them with what they need to post and you give them an example of their manager posting, that's when you're really hitting the sweet spot of driving a
Mhm.
ton of really nice organic evangelism. And the same loop is true with your customers. Like I'll reach out to our customers and I'll be like, hey, like I see you're in our partner stack referral network. Like, here's something you can talk about if you want to drive more referrals. And they'll join us for campaigns. I'll reach out to our cab. Hey, I want to let you know in a month we have this really big push. I'm going to send you a gift. If you want to repost that gift, that's totally cool. If not, don't worry about it. But like ROI is so weird, right? Like I could spend, and I did this. We like the art thing is a great example. Like send Sarah McNamara art. We have a real artist draw it by hand. It takes them 3 hours. They're making $50 an hour, $150 plus 20 shipping, $170, right? That
Mhm.
post gets 10,000 impressions. 10,000 divided by 170. I have no idea what that
What the
number is,
CPM
but
is for
that's our
that?
CPM,
Yeah, yeah.
right? But it's like it's not the CPM because you can't see how that affects things down funnel necessarily, but it's happening and it's real. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, okay. So to tie it all together, I know we were gonna like end at the top of the hour here, but I think what I'm learning from this is like, okay, talk to your customers. Like your customers are the cheat code, and then also like to get to get organic reach, like do what's in it for them. Like help your customers out. If you're helping them out, you're gonna get that kind of exposure and reach. So
Yeah.
I don't know if there's any more to add to that. I do want to open it up for other people since we only have like 5 minutes left.
I'll share the last slide I'll do
Oh
30
yeah, let's
seconds
do one more
on it.
slide. Okay,
30
good.
seconds.
Yeah,
Last slide is this one. So step 1, stop ignoring your customers. When they show you love, reach back out and then be really intentional about understanding where you need to influence and what are the different levers you can pull to drive influence in those spaces. Step 2, go from a few distribution points to like 1,000 distribution points. And you don't have one audience also. You have like 5 audiences and you want to reach them all uniquely the way they want to be reached. The third phase for us is building spaces that hold influence, doing our own events. We have this event Olympus coming up. I can put it in the chat if you want, but it's a free digital event. It's got Andrew Huberman. It's got a bunch of other amazing people. John Barrows is going to be there, Jen Allen, all kinds of stuff. I hope you sign up. But yeah, building spaces that hold influence and then having them all connect with each other. That's the third slide. There you go.
Cool. Okay.
What we got? We got 4 minutes left.
4 minutes. Fire away some questions from the audience. Let's see if anything comes through here. There's got to be people with questions. Maybe I can go back up and like also find some too. Oh, here's
Let's
one.
Connect on LinkedIn also if you want. I think I have the greatest LinkedIn URL, LinkedIn/great marketing. Yeah.
I'll add you right now.
How you approached reworking organic social. Okay, this is something I know I like obsess about all the time. But basically, like what I use is I think about organic social in terms of buckets of content. So you're like, oh man, I want to post 3 times a day, every day. That's 90 posts. Oh, that's a lot. But it's not 90 posts. It's maybe 5 concepts that you cycle through. So basically for me, organic social is about validating different content types and then thinking about how you can reach your audience. Your audience is not homogenous, right? You'll have AEs and CEOs and SDRs. So the goal isn't to try and be everyone to everything to everyone all the time. This is my philosophy. There are other philosophies to go hyper niche with one audience. I have a different philosophy. I'm not saying mine's better. People like the marketing millennials do an incredible job building like one audience. But it's like, okay, let's say I have 3 audiences: CEOs, SDRs, RevOps. How do I reach them? How do they want to be reached? Some like polls, some like short form content, some like photos, some like humanized things, some like case studies, some like video. So after you determine your audiences, you determine what content streams will reach them. And then after you determine those content streams, you think about how can I uniquely present those content streams? Because everyone likes to consume content in a different way. For me, the goal isn't to create posts that resonate with everyone. For me, the goal is to every week hit something that resonates with them deeply. So each post maybe appeals to 15% of your audience in a really, really deep way. That's how I like to do it. But everyone's got their own philosophy, and I have the total cheat code in that I work with Miduli, and she's like a genius.
Yeah, I have many cheat codes on my team as well. So I think that's a good place to wrap it. Dan, I want to thank you so much. And we'll turn this content into other content for other channels to repurpose organically and all the things. And I just want to thank everyone for joining. And then we'll share the recording and all the things after this. So thanks, Dan.
It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, Danny.
Thanks, Danny.
Common Room. And
thank you,
for having me. It was so fun. Thank you, Apollo. Bye, Apollo. Or try it out for free. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. See you all later. Bye.